Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into another episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, November 27th, and it's time for our weekly visit with Baylor Director of Sports Journalism, Jerry Hill. Jerry, as always, glad to have you on with us again today. Let's start with volleyball. Let's get right into it. We know that they coming off of that loss to Kansas, now have back-to-back wins over Texas Tech and Houston, a sweep over Texas Tech. Took 3 sets to get over Houston, but now are 20-7 overall, 12-4 in conference play. Final 2 matches on the road to get Cincinnati on Wednesday at noon and then West Virginia on Friday at 1 p.m. So we talked about it before. Potential good chance to go 4-0 down the stretch. That looks like it's still on track.
Yeah, I mean, the one against Houston, it was just kind of a gritty win. Maybe weren't at their best, but, pulled it out in 5, and that was huge. I mean, you kept winning, so that's good. I mean, if you look at this stretch, because they had won 8 in a row, so now 10 of their last 11, something like that. And if you string together 2 more, that's 12-1 over the last month and a half or whatever of the season. So they're stacking together wins. I don't know that any of these will necessarily help you get, one of those top 16 spots for a host site.
Right.
But again, you just keep building and you get a better, situation for the NCAA tournament. Even if you're traveling on the road, maybe you get that 15-16 team instead of, playing like a top 8 team or something.
Yeah, as close as you can to that 16 seed, obviously. And but to finish up 20, if they win 2 more to get 22-7 and 14-4 in conference play, that's a great season. As mentioned, they'll play Cincinnati today at noon, West Virginia on Friday at 1 p.m., day after Thanksgiving, and they'll wrap up the regular season, which is crazy to think that's already coming to a close. As basketball is getting rolling, they're getting into it. Women's basketball 2-1 since our last visit. Obviously had the tournament, Battle for Atlantis tournament in the Bahamas. I had a victory over Southern Miss and Villanova, but right in between that was the loss to Indiana, which I know was frustrating after that first quarter, getting down or having a 17-0 run by Indiana. Was really the difference in that game. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this team coming off that performance in the Bahamas? Still kind of putting it all together, obviously overcoming injuries to Jana, but it just seems like this team's going to put it all together potentially. They just haven't done it all at one time.
Yeah, and I think obviously it helps you when Aaliyah Mathura gets in here from Florida. I mean, she's going to make a difference. But yeah, that night in particular, or the day against Indiana, they just struggled shooting. I believe it was Sarah Andrews and Jada Walker that were a combined 4 for 25. And they, Indiana had a really good zone defense and just, kind of packed it in and almost kind of dared you to shoot outside, and Baylor just couldn't knock them down. So, that was a little humbling because I think that they should have been in that championship game against North Carolina, which would have been a huge test. So I think you still probably would have gone 2-1, but you would have had a chance to play against, a top 16 team. So a little bit of a struggle. And then, even against Villanova, they were struggling in that one as well, tied going into the 4th, but then they were able to pull it out, just kind of fed Nettie down in the post, and she kind of took over, scored 8 of their first 11 points in that 4th quarter. So good to get that win and kind of finish on a good note.
Yeah, so next up, they'll face New Orleans on Friday at 2 p.m., day after Thanksgiving, and then Louisiana Tech on Sunday at 2 p.m. Both of those games are in Waco. Expectations for those games, obviously, you need to win them. You don't want to drop those 2 contests is coming off this tournament. But any expectations in those games? And then when exactly is the Florida transfer available? Do you know his exact date when that becomes official? Is it beginning of the semester? Is it right after the end of the semester break? How does that work?
She has to get her grades from Florida before she'll be eligible here. So as soon as their grades are posted there and she can get here, then she would be eligible. So I think it was earliest possible would be the start of conference play, which is December 21st at Kansas. It'd be great to have her for then, but if not, then probably right after that. That's like I said, best case scenario is she would be here in time for that conference opener, December 21st at Kansas, which would be great to have her for that. The next 5 are all at home, against teams that you should beat. That would get them to 10-2 going into conference. So, I think they'd like to be even better. This schedule was set up probably for them to go 11-1, 12-0. So, even that would be a disappointment that, if they win the next 5. Yeah. But again, you can build a little momentum here with these 5 games at home. And get that momentum going into conference play, and then you get Aaliyah in, and I think this team eventually could be really, really good. Nettie showed in that game against Villanova, she can take over a game. She's got to demand the ball. The guards have got to get it to her, but she is really tough to stop if she gets it down low.
Yeah. So obviously some hurdles to overcome from the beginning of the season with the injuries, but then also getting another player in, going to be a key player, just so abnormal, to have a player come in the semester. I don't know if a Baylor team, women's basketball team, men's basketball team has ever done that before. Maybe in the early Scott Drew years, I remember maybe having someone that became eligible after the semester break, but in general, I don't know if I've ever heard it. Do you remember any instance when something like that came to play?
The one that kind of rings a bell, and I don't remember if he even wound up playing that year, but Mamadou came in, I believe, at mid-year.
Okay.
Mamadou,
I remember that.
Jen. And I don't remember if he played that spring or if he waited until the fall, but I believe he came in like December or January, so got in that time, but I don't remember if he actually, played any that year. But yeah, that's an odd deal. I mean, you do see it some across the country, but it's certainly not the norm. But great addition for this team, going at least, hopefully at the start of conference play.
Yeah, potential to gel throughout the season, and obviously the end goal is the NCAA tournament and getting deep, making a deep run there. So you have time to do it. It might limit your early season success, but the high end potential is obviously still there. And moving to the men's side, very similar result for them, except that the competition there was a little bit more challenging, I would say, than the women's side. But go to the Bahamas, finish 1-1. The Baha Mar Hoops Bahama Championships, mouthful there to say, but first game, really fun, really dramatic. I think Scott Drew is not sure if he wants to face Rick Pitino in these games in the Bahamas anymore after that. I don't know what year that was against Louisville when they got down so big and then come back and beat them. This one just as epic. I mean, it just looked like they were down and out, but then come back to win in double overtime with Jeremy Roach's 3-point buzzer beater. And man, that was that particular game it showed a lot of what Baylor can be. Now defensively they got to get better, but offensively you saw the potential from everyone. I think VJ obviously struggled kind of his homecoming. It looks like he had a little bit of nerves, a little bit of extra energy, but he settled in late, and you just kind of saw the potential for that team in that game and the way that they fought and battled. And I think that's going to be the kind of the makeup of this team. They're never going to stop. They're always going to battle. Norchid Omier is going to be that guy as well. It seems like they have a lot of those. Now they just got to put it all together. And then you go into the Tennessee game. I just don't think they ever recovered physically from that double overtime game. All the energy in there, they get down big, but that was the theme in both of those games. And we've seen it now multiple times this season, getting down big. That can't happen. Obviously you face UConn coming up, but in general, what were your overall thoughts about what this team did, and what do we learn anything additional from them and what they're capable of?
Yeah, I think like you said, I think they've got to shore things up on defense. That was really a struggle in both games, but particularly in the St. John's game. They couldn't stop them there for the longest time. But yeah, I think you're right, though. They did show fight really even in both of those games. I think, the way that Tennessee game started, I think you could have seen a repeat of the Gonzaga game, where they wound up losing by 33 or 38. But, they kind of, again, they fought in the second half. I don't remember how close they wound up getting it, but lose by 15, I believe. So they really did fight in that game. So you like to see that they're not going to give up. that they're going to keep fighting. But they've got to kind of put some things together. Obviously both of those teams were very good that they played, and I think they were fortunate, maybe even lucky, to win that first one against St. John's. You mentioned VJ. VJ hit the first 3-pointer that at least gave you a chance. And then obviously they missed the free throws there at the end, and Jeremy hits the big 3. I mean, man, that was an incredible shot. It was one of those really high arcing where you're like, man, is this ever going to come down? It's like one of those punts that just soar. It was that kind of shot by Jeremy, but man, that's a huge win though. That's one of those resume builders, Colt, because people are going to look back on that. And I think St. John's is going to be a really good team. They wound up beating Virginia pretty handily in the next game. So, I just think they need to figure some things out. We thought, they beat Arkansas, so everything's cool. But no, it's not. I mean, they still have to build that chemistry, and they still have to, kind of figure things out. And they'll do that as they go along. We've seen this too many times from Scott and his staff. And again, you're dealing with pretty much a new staff as well. So there's just so many new pieces here that you've just kind of got to grow and build, and hopefully build that chemistry and play for March instead of, worrying so much about November. Let's play for, February and March and be a much better team then.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically 4 games where you're going into the season, they're going to be top 25 type games. They split those so far. I think the frustrating part is that in 2 of those games, you basically got blown out by Tennessee and Gonzaga. And I don't think that's going to be the norm throughout the season. I think once you get into the Big 12 play, I mean, there might be some instances where you lose by double figures on the road to a top team, but we haven't seen that from Scott Drew teams really ever. Getting blown out the way that they have. And it's just, a snowball effect, especially coming off an emotional game against St. John's. I think that was a big concern. But what I will say, it was nice to see Langston Love back in the lineup and playing. That's going to take some time to get him back. Obviously, he's back from injury, but he has to build that stamina up. And that's going to be a key piece for a team that doesn't have a deep bench. Him playing is massive, and he's a bigger guard. And it was kind of interesting. VJ's pretty long and lanky, but when you see Langston out on the court, he's just so much thicker, and you can kind of see why he's so valuable for this team. And it just seems like he's going to have to get his legs back to take this team to the next level, I think, offensively and defensively.
Yeah, and I think just the fact, like you said, the fact that he was able to get minutes and play and get in there and rebound and things like that, that's going to help him in the next game out. So, I think all of that is good, and again, gives you another piece. You felt like with, all of those newcomers and stuff that you had the pieces you need, and I think you still do. But Langston is a guy that's played here. He's been through Scott's, team and gone through this experience before. He's been around for a good while now. So I think that presence alone really helps you, and maybe he can help kind of bring along the other guys as well. Guys, this isn't our standard. We need to play better than this. We need to play better defense than this. So I think that's where he can help, is just, certainly being out there on the court, but, kind of showing them, this is not the standard.
Yeah. Obviously, Baylor will now come back, face New Orleans today at 1 p.m. Central Time. And then a week from today, we'll face UConn in the Big 12 Big East battle at 5:30 p.m. Central Time to start the month of December. And that's kind of the last test before you get into conference play, which is at the beginning or at the end of December now. Right. You don't have to wait until January. These conference schedules expand with the expanded conference. And, you don't even get into the new year before you're starting conference play. But New Orleans game, kind of a tune-up game, kind of get your feet back, and then you have a week off until you face UConn, they lost. I mean, that was I don't even remember who they lost to, and I should have researched before getting this game. Memphis, right. Yeah. Which I think was a pretty sizable upset, and I know that Hurley was not happy with some of the stuff that was going on in that game. I saw some clips of him being pretty upset. Yeah. But Baylor, that's another chance for Baylor to kind of grow and go see where they are. Another benchmark of let's get our feet back. Obviously you want to beat New Orleans. That's a big piece to this. If you don't beat New Orleans, then you have a lot of other problems to worry about. But to that UConn game right before conference play, top 5, top 10 type of team, you win that one, and you're going into Big 12 play pretty confidently. And I'm not saying they're going to. I think it's going to be a massive challenge. Right. But it's a game that can propel you and give you a lot of confidence going into league play.
And Colt, I know Scott never shies away from competition, but you almost, worry about this being a little bit too much. I mean, when you've already played Gonzaga and Arkansas and St. John's, Tennessee, you worry about now you get the two-time defending national champion. Again, they did lose a game, but they're still really good. So that will be a tough one, particularly on the road. I will say New Orleans handed Tulane a loss. I believe it might have been Monday night, but they were an 18-point underdog in that one and beat Tulane. So that was a big win for them. So they come in with a little bit of confidence for today's game at 1 against the Bears.
Yeah, you want to get out of this stretch healthy for one. Obviously, getting Langston Love back, but the good news is after that UConn game, they do have a few games before Big 12 play to kind of get their feet back under them. But it's been a grind. We knew that going into the season, but it's just what's your record going to be afterward? How mentally shot are you going to be after gearing back up, and then you get into league play and you got those at least one a week. I mean, really every game, but you're talking about top 25 games every single week that you're having to get ready for. And it's part of playing in the Big 12, but Scott Drew said, we're not going to wait till the Big 12. We want to get this going in the non-conference. And it's been a challenge. They know what they have to work on, to say the least. So really anxious to see them against New Orleans, the way they come back. And then obviously against UConn next week. So any last thoughts on where Baylor basketball, men's and women's, is at this point? And then we'll preview a little bit of the football game this weekend.
Well, you kind of touched on it. I think both are a little similar. The defensive end is, I think, where both of them need to improve, honestly. Now, Baylor didn't shoot the ball great against Indiana, but they really bounced back well against Villanova, but, still gave up a lot of points. That was a Villanova team that had only scored 36 against North Carolina, and they scored 37 in the first 15 minutes. So you've got to do some work on the defensive end. I think Villanova hit its first 6 3-pointers. So you need to get out there and defend. So I think that's probably the thing for both teams is on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think we've seen both of these teams execute offensively. Nikki Collins' group, every year she's been in Waco, has been able to score the ball. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. Obviously, Scott Drew's offensive efficiency is always great. So if they can get their defense on track, that's a huge sign for both of them. But all right, so big football game this weekend. We're not talking about bowl eligibility anymore.
Right.
I'm talking about 7 wins. They have secured a winning season, interestingly enough. Like, that's the first one since 21, and really only the third one since 2019. So it's kind of been up and down, we know. But those things those two boxes have been checked. But now it's beating Kansas, keeping your chances for a potential Big 12 championship appearance, which would be so small. Like, the chances of that happening are so small, but it's still on the table. To get to 8 wins, to set you up for potentially 9 wins, which I think anyone coming into this season says, absolutely, you take that. I mean, you're thrilled with that more than just take it. You're thrilled with that after last season. But reflecting on the Houston game first, the offense just, I don't want to say it was bad, but it was bad. But they won the game. They did enough offensively. They just shot themselves in the foot, starting with the interceptions. Obviously, the bad snap there in the first half really just kept that game close and probably gave Houston a little more motivation for that second half. If it's 24-7 or 24-10 going into the second half, maybe it changes a little bit. But overall, I think you had to be impressed with the defense but also have to be concerned with the offense after that game against Houston.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern was in the passing game, because the running game, I mean, it didn't put up a lot of numbers, but, Bryson still got 100 yards. So I thought they did a good enough job on the ground. Didn't get a lot besides him. But now I think, 25 of those, you mentioned the bad snap, that goes against the rushing, which I'm not sure if that should be that way. But again, you just didn't run the ball maybe as consistently as you have. But Sawyer, you really had not seen, I would call that a stinker. And you really had not seen that out of him at all. He had thrown 4 picks for the year and threw 3 that night. So, it was
basically on 3 possessions.
Yeah.
And one being a pick 6. Yeah.
To the same guy. I mean, that's what's incredible. So, it was a tough game for him. But I fully expect him to bounce back. And really, even in game, he kind of bounced back. I think it was after the first interception, and then Devin Bobby got one in the end zone to get him the ball back. He drives him down the field, throws to Michael Trigg for the touchdown. So he responded in the game. And I don't really count much about that last one, because I believe it was a fourth down play, and you're just trying to make a play. It was honestly would have been better for Houston if they had just batted it down instead of getting the pick. But again, I think he will bounce back from that. And, and there may have been some communication with the receiver and stuff too. Interceptions are not always just on your quarterback. It's probably a little bit on the receiver. Sometimes it's on the offensive line for not giving him the protection. He did get a couple of sacks there, start the third quarter. So yeah, offense has some things to work on, certainly. But Coach Aranda tried to tell us that week, this is a good Houston defense, and they were. But I think Baylor's defense did step up because they had to. Devin Bobby's interception there, with the backs.
That was early.
Yeah, that was after his first interception. So, defense answered, their backs were against the wall. They're already in the red zone, and Devin Bobby came up with that big interception in the end zone. And then they kind of sealed the deal with, a couple of fourth quarter interceptions and then the fumble recovery on the kickoff return. So defense, special teams, they were the ones that really sealed the deal. I'll go to Isaiah Hankins too. You talked about the snap over the head. He gets some points. Even they lost it back to the 27, but he connects on a 45-yard field goal to make it a double-digit lead going into half. And then when Houston had cut into it, after an interception, I'm trying to remember who it was. It may have been Lemire. When Devin Lemire gets that interception, then Isaiah connects on a 50-yarder, which made it again a 10-point game. So I think those two. Field goals and then the recovery on the not on the onside kick, on the ensuing kickoff. I think, those were kind of the plays that sealed the deal because the offense couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was. And now you switch to a Kansas team who's on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of offense. Defense is okay. They're more in line with what Baylor faced the previous 4 games.
Yeah.
They're going to give it big plays, but offensively, I would say right now the best offense in the Big 12, the way they perform running the football and also throwing the football. They're not turning the football over anymore. And then you throw in Baylor's offense, you expect them to bounce back. I'm not saying that they didn't fully game plan for Houston, but you could tell that was one of those, like, we know we need to get probably 20 points to win this game. They did that. Now you're looking at a game with Kansas. The over and under is 61.5 points. These are two of the most, they are the two most explosive offenses in the Big 12 right now. If you look at plays over 30 yards created and versus how many plays they run, these are number 1 and number 2 with Baylor to be in number 1. Are you taking the over 61.5 or the under 61.5 for this game?
Probably weather plays some of it. I haven't looked ahead to see what that is, but I think in general, I probably would take over just because Kansas offense has been so good. The running game in particular, but Jalen Daniels is a better passer than you think. So he did have a bunch of interceptions early, and that was why they got off. I believe they were at 1-5 at one point. I know we talk about Baylor being 2-4. They were 1-5, I believe, going into their first break. So they've really turned it around, and you can make the case, which Dave Aranda did, that they're right now the best team Baylor's played because of how they're playing right now. They've beaten 3 ranked teams in a row. And I believe I heard somebody say this, and maybe it's an unranked team versus ranked, but might be the first time in NCAA history
ever
you've had an unranked team beat 3 straight ranked teams. So
I think the stat was under 500 team to do it. Yeah. So not even ranked team. It's like if you're under, which makes sense. I mean, there's not very many opportunities to win 3 in a row and still be under 500. Then they did that.
Yeah, it's incredible. So they're really on a roll, and as much as I would have wanted maybe Kansas to be eliminated by now, Nick Florence made this point when I talked to him earlier this week. You want to play teams at their best. Maybe the fans don't, but as players, you want to play the other team when they're at their best. Kansas is at their best right now. So if you win this game, it's a big feather in your cap because you've also eliminated them from bowl, and you've gotten to 8 wins, And, like you talked about, I know the odds aren't really high. 18%, I think, is what I had seen. So, in the words of Dumb or Dumber, so you're telling me there's a chance,
There is a
So
chance.
there is a chance going into this weekend, as small as it might be. I think you have to, three of the top four teams, three of the teams tied for first place right now, have to lose. Obviously, you have to beat Kansas as well. But if three of those top four teams lose, then you're probably going to be in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, crazy to think about that. 6 games ago, that would be the chance for Baylor to have that. Still a long chance, but they put themselves in the position. Arguably, Iowa State, Kansas State might take this claim, but this is possibly the best game of this weekend for the Big 12. I would say arguably the two best teams in the league right now. A lot goes into that. Arizona State has played really well, but both they're 9-1 combined in the last 5. Kansas has beat 3 ranked teams in a row who are basically in the Big 12 championship if they win that game against Kansas and they lose. So yeah, really, really fun weekend this weekend. A lot of things going on in Waco. Football game at 11 a.m. Central Time. Make sure you're there to see this game, and then obviously sets up for bowl season. So, all right, Baylor fans, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. Thanks to Jerry, as always, for hopping on with us. Thanks to each of you for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow, and we'll see you later this week. Sick and Bears.